So today's lecture is all about getting a job, which for me is one of the points of teaching this class is I want everybody to be able to get a good job when they graduate. And one of the first things you have to do when you're looking for a job is consider what location you want to work in. There are a number of different locations around the US that are pretty good for the biotech industry. The Bay Area has a lot of companies, the Boston area, Washington DC and Maryland have NIH and NSF and people that work for them that actually carry out research. Research Triangle Park in the Raleigh-Durham area of North Carolina is rich in biotech companies. San Diego has a heck of a lot of biotech companies. We tend to have a lot of smaller startup companies, which might not pay as much in the beginning, but might offer stock options as a startup to people who are working with them. So when we talk about compensation, you can figure that in as well. So San Diego is a very good area to look for jobs. Now, within any area, such as San Diego, there's going to be specific places where you can look for jobs. And I know Craigslist has an absolutely shitty reputation in terms of finding roommates or finding a car and stuff like that. But in terms of jobs, Craigslist is not bad. There's not a lot, there's always scammers everywhere, but in terms of the number of scammers, like in the roommates area of Craigslist, there's almost no scammers in Craigslist in comparison. It's also not going to be the place where you're going to find the really, really high-paying jobs in general. But if you're looking for an entry-level position, generally a lot of people will be advertising on entry-level positions on Craigslist. But also, there are other places. There's UCSD, Scripps and Salk and Burnham Institute, the La Jolla Institute of Allergy and Immunology. There are aggregator spaces like Biocom runs a website where all of its participating companies, and Biocom is like the biotech community page. So all of the biotech companies in the area will generally join Biocom, and so then they can post their jobs in that area. Don't overlook staffing companies. Staffing companies for new people are a great way to get your foot in the door for your first job. So places like BioPhase, Simply Hired, Kelly, Aerotech, all of these places will hire. Now, they're not gonna pay as much as someone with experience. But if you can't find something in the normal methods of going to UCSD or Scripps or one of the companies directly, a lot of the smaller companies will actually sign up with one of these temporary staffing agencies because they don't have HR, they don't have big HR departments of their own. So they don't have the capacity to assign someone to scroll through all the resumes and do all the stuff that's associated with hiring people. They will probably conduct interviews on site, but sometimes interviews on site are sort of like sketchy. Not in a bad way sketchy, just as in people in smaller companies, many of them have no experience asking questions in an interview, and so you end up with asking the same question again and again and again because they hear that they're going to be assigned to give an interview to somebody, and they're like, crap, what do I ask them? And they go to the internet and they search for good interview questions. First page pops up, that's what I'm going to ask, and so you'll get asked the same stuff again and again. What the hiring companies are also good for is temporary employment. A lot of the companies, the larger companies, will have specific projects for a certain period, but they know they don't want to hire someone permanently and then have to let them go. So for example, my husband got hired on at Hologic, but he wasn't working for Hologic, he was working for a company called IQ, which was a temporary staffing company. And they had a year-long project. They had bought another company, and they needed to migrate all of the documents from one company to another. And so they needed someone who had the ability to do QA, that had the ability to look at the documents, incorporate them in, follow protocols, stuff like that, and get data out of them and stuff like that, and then send them off to scanning and filing and stuff like that. So, but they knew that this project would not last forever. So they hired people on a 6-month renewable contract, and after a year they said, okay, the project is done. And my husband knew the project was coming to an end because after 11 months he was like, every day at work going, there's nothing to do. So he's like, we're not going to get hired for a third 6-month term because everything's all done. So, but you know, you're hired for the 6 month and then 6 months, so they pay you for that 6 months even with absolutely nothing to do. So, so working at one of these temporary agencies, again, gets you that important 6 months, year and a half of experience that you can then go to another biotech company and say, look, I've got experience now, you know, and they're more likely to look at you with that 1 year of experience. So San Diego Biotechnology Network Directory is another place where you can find opportunities. Monster and Indeed, remember that you guys probably already know this, but if you have a job search, you set up your keywords on Indeed, and it'll say, here's the ones you haven't seen recently, so you're not slogging through, you know, 200 jobs every time. It'll only show you the new ones. There are city and county jobs that are available, not a lot, but you know, occasionally a wastewater treatment plant, or they're looking for an analytical chemist to, you know, to do HPLC on water and stuff like that. So they do exist. But one of the most important places you're going to find opportunities is networking. If you know anyone from your classes who's already gotten a job, reach out to them, talk to them, say, hey, is your company hiring? Do you know of any other companies that are hiring? So you start getting to know people, you start asking. You start making connections on LinkedIn, make sure your info's up to date on LinkedIn, you know, so that people can contact you. More and more people are using LinkedIn as a way to find people. There's American Women in Science, or ACS meetings, so there's lots of different ways to meet people. And whenever you meet someone, you know, hey, do you know anyone who's hiring? You know, you sort of have to work that into conversation. You can't be like, hi, my name is Kathy, nice to meet you, are you hiring? You know, you're sort of working in a little bit after talking to them for a while. Now, once you've identified who you would like to work for, you're going to need a resume. And there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all resume. You cannot write only a single resume and use that for every single job that you apply for. It will need to be different for every job, because every job will have different specifications listed in the job ad, and you need to make sure that those key words are in your resume. So when you finish this class, you will have done centrifugation. You will know how to do SDS page gels. You will know how to run agarose gels. You will know how to do column chromatography, etc. So you'll know how to do PCR. So as an example, when a company in their job ad says, we want someone who knows PCR, your resume should say, you know, that you've done PCR. If they say polymerase chain reaction, your resume should say polymerase chain reaction and not PCR. So your resume needs to have as many key words as possible in the body of the resume without lying. Don't ever lie on a resume unless they say, how long do you intend to work here? In which case the proper answer is, oh, forever. I learned that in my first job, my first job interview, that you cannot be honest with people. Back when I was in high school and looking for a summer job before I went off to college, I applied at a nursing home because they were hiring, they were hiring people to be certified nursing assistants. So I applied to be a certified nursing assistant. How long will you work here? Well, I'm going to be going off to college in 3 months, but I can give you, full-time, overtime, whatever you need for the first 3 months, and then I'd be happy to come work on holidays, weekends, whatever you need after that. Oh no, we want, now it didn't matter that the average length of time that a person stayed there was 3 months, so they should have been perfectly happy with 3 months. But oh no, we can't possibly hire you. So the next same type of company I applied for, because that's what I could do right out of high school, was another nursing home, And how long will you stay? Oh, well, I'm going off to a local community college, you know, at the end of the summer, but I will still be available to work. Boom, you're hired, and then after 3 months, okay, bye. You know, so, because they have a lot of turnover there, so, you know, why do you get, and because I said, well, I'm going off to college, but I'd be happy to come in on weekends and holidays. They were perfectly happy to have me come in on weekends and holidays, you know, and have somebody, because their regular employees wanted the holidays off. Their regular employees, you know, didn't want to work Christmas and New Year's and Easter and stuff like that, and I was more than happy to make the overtime. So, you know, or double pay for holidays. So, it's all in how you explain things to people. So, yeah, don't ever tell them the truth in terms of your long-term intentions. Oh no, I want to work for you forever, because that's what they want to hear sometimes. But in terms of your job skills, don't lie about what you know in terms of job skills. Now, companies will have you submit your resume electronically, so make sure you have both your text, rich text format, PDF, whatever. If they specify in the job ad the format, make sure you submit that type of format. Otherwise, maybe a PDF or something of your resume, just to make sure that it is very readable. You don't want to lose any special formatting you have in your resume. And if you're using like a text format, if you're trying to convert Microsoft Word to text, you know, of course, you know, sometimes you can lose any special formatting you have. When you have your resume submitted to the company, make sure you remember which resume you submitted. Don't bring the resume which says you know how to do column chromatography if it's someone who's interested in someone who does PCR. So this means you're going to have to keep track of which resume you send to who. So, and you need to start doing it from the very beginning, because you're going to lose track real fast. A job search can take full time, looking through all the different sites on an everyday basis to see what new jobs have popped up will be a full-time job for you after you graduate. And you do want to do this on a daily basis, because a lot of companies, when they're getting resumes, they will only maybe look at the first 100 resumes submitted. And maybe not so much in an era of relatively low unemployment, but there are still a lot of people looking to move around, and it will only take them 24 to 48 hours to get those first 100 resumes submitted. And if you are number 101, and they say to the computer, show me the first 100 resumes, the computer's not going to say, oh, but we have a really close one at number 101. You know, you're just going to be out of luck because you were number 101. So you should be doing this on an everyday basis to make sure you have the best chance of being in that first 100, because they just, you know, sometimes they will get inundated for a particular job. Okay, so on your resume, you want to make sure you have your name, your email, your phone. You don't need to put your address, because particularly if you're applying for something across the country, they don't need to know that you are living in San Diego, that you're perfectly willing to relocate to Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. What they're going to do is they're going to say, oh, this person's from San Diego. They're going to want us to pay moving expenses. They're going to start making assumptions about what you're going to want, and they're going to rule you out immediately, because that's what HR does. They will look at that first 100 resumes, and they will be looking for legal reasons to rule people out. Oh, across the country we'll want moving expenses? No. Oh, too much experience? No. And that's another thing that my husband has encountered in his job search. When after his boss at Scripps lost his grant, he applied for some companies that had exactly his skill set. They wanted exactly what he knew how to do, and he applied. And he didn't hear back, or he either heard no right away, or that he wouldn't hear back. And so I said, well, you have nothing to lose by calling. And so he called, and they said, oh, you have too much experience. But I have the perfect experience. Yes, you're exactly what we're looking for, but you're going to want too much money, and you're not going to be happy, and you're going to want to leave, you know, in a year or so. He'd be like, no, I'd be perfectly happy to do this job long term. Oh no, you're not going to like it here, because you have too much experience. So they will be making judgments to rule people out, whether they are founded or not. So, and you guys don't have to worry about too much experience yet, but as you get older, you will. Okay, so when you give them your email, make sure it is a professional email. One time a student in this class showed me their resume, and their email address they were using was beachchick69. And I said, you're going to have to find a different email because this one is just not professional enough. Oh, really? I didn't even think about that. Yeah, it's the impression you give to companies. So from the top down. Ways to contact you basically on your resume. You don't need the objective anymore. If you search on the internet, a lot of places will say you need an objective. The objective to be a fantastic research assistant. Nobody does that anymore. Now it's pretty much like a summary statement. A recent or a SDSU graduate with molecular biology experience or with chemistry experience seeks position in in biotech, something like that. And here's my skills. So working in what you know, even in the summary statement. And if you have done work in a lab here, that counts as experience. So it doesn't have to necessarily be paid experience. It's experience you've gotten in pursuit of your education. It is still experience. You have learned things as part of that, and don't neglect what you learned while working for Dr. Garman or Dr. Huxford or whoever you were doing, whoever you were, your Grotjon, whoever you were doing your work for, it's still a kind of experience. And so, but when you write that summary statement, you don't want to be pretentious. You don't want to say, a stellar, recent graduate seeks position of blah blah blah. So it should be very factual and not over the top. Okay, so you want to start off with your degree, that you've gotten your recent degree, so they can see you actually have your degree, your major, STSU. Only put your GPA if it's really exceptional. If it's over like 3.6 or something like that, you can put it. If it's 3.2, yeah, I wouldn't even bother, because 3.2, they're like, yeah, a lot of people can get 3.2. So leave that off. If you have any kind of a web page, you can link your URL, but you certainly don't have to. And as I said, you're matching the words and the skills, the keywords in the ad. You want to match those exactly, and if you can work them in maybe twice, that's good, because everything that is submitted to HR with a company of any size, there's very often no human eyes that read it first. So you get the first batch of 100, and the HR person puts them automatically into an electronic keyword scanner. And the electronic keyword scanner says, here's the words we're looking for. We're looking for polymerase chain reaction. We're looking for chromatography. We're looking for, all these. And the more times your word appears in there, the higher the score you're going to get, even before human eyes have looked at it. And then they'll get maybe the top 25 out of that. And then they start weeding people out for various reasons. So that's why you want to make sure that your keywords are matching exactly, because that's what's going to be programmed in. Okay, so if you have relative work experience, tell them what you've learned. So, work experience, and you can say that you've done this in the lab of blah, 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 and some of the techniques or some of the goals of the research that you did. If you worked at Baskin-Robbins, for example, scooping ice cream, don't bother expanding on that. So here's some research I did, and then boom, I had this job from this time to this time. Showing maybe that you can hold a job for 2 or 3 years or something like that. That would be a reason to include it, but they're not going to care that you learned how to scoop ice cream at Baskin-Robbins unless if it's relevant. So if they're looking for someone with management experience, even a little bit of management experience, Well, if you were a manager level person at Baskin-Robbins, then you would include that, you know. So I was a manager at Baskin-Robbins, and then I went on to research, so I have all these different types of experience that you're looking for. And references, but most people do not include references in the resume itself that you are submitting unless they're specifically requested. And when you do, when you go to the job interview, you should have a printed out page with reference information on it, because they may ask you at the job interview, who are your references? So you want to be able to give them, you know, name, affiliation, you know, like Dr. Vandergeer, Professor, SDSU, here's his phone number, here's his email address, you know, so that they can contact him if they decide to offer you the job. But you want to be sure that you bring them to the interview, because you never know at what point they're going to ask you for them. Some companies will ask you for them before they've even made their decision. Some companies will not ask you for them until after they think they want you, and then they're just checking to make sure. So different companies will do it differently. For most of you, unless you have just tons of experience, your resume is going to be one page. My resume is 2 full pages because I have experience with lots of different things, lots of different people that I've worked with. You know, San Diego Police Department, I've worked with Dr. Bohanik in biology. I've done lots of different projects. I've got my teaching and I've got my research experience, so mine is 2 pages. But yours is probably going to be 1 page unless you have a lot of publications. And if you do have a publication, like one at the bottom to include, by all means include your publications. Make sure you proofread your resume. Don't rely on Microsoft Word for grammar and spell checking, because Microsoft Word, although it's getting better, cannot always tell the difference between here, here, and here, and can't tell the difference between pair and pair. You know, so you can have a misspelling in your resume without realizing it if you are relying on Microsoft Word. Also, check your grammar. So make sure you show it to someone else who's pretty good at that, who has eyes on it, who can spot things like that. You want to make sure that you're using active verbs when you're describing your duties in lab. You know, examined, organized, maintained, designed, identified. You know, identified a new, you know, protein, things like that, or, you know, isolated. So making sure that it just seems a little peppier. So you know, solution oriented with strong critical thinking abilities. Words which say you really want to hire me. You don't know yet that you want to hire me, but you want to hire me. You don't include hobbies unless it's relevant. And it might be relevant. So for example, if someone was applying for a job with Forrest Rower over in biology, well, he does South Sea coral atoll work. And so if someone knows how to do diving, for example, that might be something that's very, very relevant that you would put on a resume if you were looking for that kind of a job with someone. Now, how are you going to know? This means you need to research. You need to research the company you're going to be working for. You need to research the person you're going to be working with. Take a look at their papers, read their papers, see what kinds of things they're doing, and make sure you review their papers if you get called for a job interview. So this is part of the reason why looking for a job is a full-time job, because there's a lot of work that has to go into even being able to submit a single resume to someone. You want to make sure that you're very, very prepared so you have the absolute best opportunity to get that job. If you have a particular award, make sure you can include any award, like, you know, Student of the Year or something like that. And when you save the file, save it as name and then job title, because you want it to show up in their system. Don't call it something like Resume 1, because everyone's going to send in their resume and it's going to be called Resume 1. You want to make them easy for it to find, easy for them to find your resume and not have to slog through all of the resume ones that are in their downloaded folder when they've downloaded all the emails that have come in for the job ad. So make it easy for them to find you. Did you have a hand? No? It's okay if you do. Okay, you do want to include a cover letter. A cover letter is a good shot at explaining why they should hire you. And it's okay to highlight the things that are in your resume. It's okay to tell them why you're excited about their company. And again, you're going to have a different cover letter for every job. There's no one cover letter that's going to suffice for everything. And you can certainly research, standard terminology for cover letters online, but make it a little bit personal to the company that you are going to be applying at. So make sure you tell them, how much you learned in your biochemistry lab techniques class, or your instrumental analysis class, that would be relevant to what they're looking for in the job ad. And so you're using the cover letter to highlight your skills. So it's the old adage, when you're writing a paper, you're gonna tell them what you're gonna tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So the cover letter is, you're telling them what you're gonna tell them in your resume. You're pointing out, hey, here's the things that you should be looking for in my resume, and here's why I am a good fit. So you don't just use phrases like, I'm the best candidate for the job, but you're telling them what's great about their company and why you're excited, about their company. Companies always want to hear why you think they're great. And that can be complete bullshit. Really, the true answer to why do you want this job is because you're going to pay me. But companies never want to hear, because I need the money for rent. They do not want that as an answer. They want to hear why they're fantastic, why you're excited about their company. But would you work for them for free? No. Pretty much nobody would work for them for free. So the true answer is because you're going to pay me. But you have to put thought into the cover letter. So in terms of the organizations, as I said, you might potentially be applying to hundreds of jobs. And so you want to make sure that as you are applying, you're saving the job descriptions. Don't count on Craigslist, because Craigslist will only show you like the 100 newest job applications. So those will be disappearing, within a couple weeks maybe. You won't be able to find them anymore. So start a file. Name of the company, here's the job description, here's my resume, here's any correspondence with this person. Save copies in this folder, because you never know, sometimes a company will come back to you 6 months later. And again, when my husband was looking for jobs, and he applied a bunch of places, and he got the job that he was working at Scripps, where he worked for 23 years, but like 9 months after he got the job at Scripps, Johnson & Johnson called him up and said, okay, we have a job for you. And he's like, yeah, I'm working elsewhere now. But maybe if he wasn't happy at Scripps, maybe he would have preferred that job at Johnson & Johnson, who knows? So, but you don't just want to say, oh yes, I'm interested. You want to make sure you have that description for the job you applied for saved on your computer, so you can go in there and talk to them about the job that they think they're hiring you for, and not just some, okay, here's what I can do. It might not be relevant at all. You might be talking about biochem lab techniques, and they might be thinking instrumental lab techniques, and they'd be going, why did we call this person again? So keeping organized. When the call for the interview comes, you want to be able to specifically say, oh yes, that job. And again, my husband has gone through job searches over the years, and so one time he got a phone call that said, hi, this is I think University of San Diego or something like that, we're calling about the lab tech job. And he's like, and which one was that? And they quickly were not interested, because he could not even pinpoint which job he had applied for at the place that was calling him, because he had applied for several jobs there. And so you want to at least be able to narrow it down and try to use some words on your side which can help you pinpoint which job it was. Some place like UCSD, when you look at the UCSD job site, there are dozens of lab tech jobs. Now, you might only be applying for 3 or 4 of them, but you also are not going to find that job, the lab tech job, listed on the UCSD website when they call you to interview for the job. Because jobs, just like at San Diego State, jobs are listed generally until they feel they have a good enough pool of candidates, at which point, very often, they will pull the job ad. Now, if they haven't gotten a good pool of candidates, it will probably still be up there. But if they get, say, 20 or 30 good candidates to look through, they take the ad down. So then if you go, crap, lab job at UCSD, which one was that? And you go searching for it later, it's not going to be there. So you want to save it while you are applying for it. And as I already mentioned, you want to prepare, particularly before the interview, but you want to make sure that if it's a company, that you've looked at the company website. If it's an academic site, that you have looked at some of their most recent papers. I assume by now you all have learned how to use the library and look up, publications of a particular author, making sure it's the correct name so that you're not looking at the wrong Joe Smith, at the wrong university. Look at the goals and products the company has. So if you get called to interview, say at IDT in Carlsbad, that makes they make oligonucleotides. So maybe they're calling you for a job to produce oligonucleotides. You would want to review the information you learned in this class about how to make oligonucleotides. So in the interview, you can impress them with the fact that you know the basic steps of oligonucleotide synthesis. Because they don't want someone that's just going to come in and say, oh yeah, I can do whatever you need me to. They want someone who's done their research and is going to be a little bit excited about the job. Make sure you are always a little bit overdressed. Even if they say, casual's fine, casual for you would mean a nice button-down shirt and khakis. You don't show up to a job interview in t-shirt and jeans. Probably not even for Walmart, well, maybe Walmart. But you always want to be a little bit better dressed than the person that's going to interview you. So don't ever just show up wearing holes in the clothes and stuff like that. Make sure you have copies of your resume for everyone. When my husband was working at Hologic, several times he got roped into, come on, we have to interview someone for a position. He didn't know this person. He hadn't seen the resume. He didn't know, what the job that they were applying for even was. And so and Hologic was a big company. You'd think they could have found enough employees to interview, but sometimes they'll just grab who's ever around. And so he's asking the same stupid questions of, why do you want to work here? Why do you think you'd be good for this job, etc. Because there was no preparation involved in him preparing for the interview. So you cannot assume that everyone there is going to have seen your resume. So you want to make sure you have copies of your resume so that they can ask you about your experience and stuff like that. And anything that says on your resume, make sure that you know how to explain it. If it says that you know PCR, make sure you've reviewed the steps of PCR. Make sure you can tell them about how you used PCR in your biochem class, the experiment that you did. Make sure you tell them, if they want HPLC experience and you have that in your resume. Make sure you know how the HPLC works. What did you isolate on an HPLC? Things like that. So you always want to be able to explain what's on your resume. You want to bring something to write on because they're going to be talking and you may think of a question. You don't want to forget that question. Write it down on a piece of paper. You can also use that to write down the names of the people who are interviewing you because you're going to have to thank them later. That's a slide that's coming up. So make sure you have something to write on. Find out how many people will be at the interview. Is it going to be a short interview? Is it going to be a long interview? Some companies will interview you for 1 hour. Some companies have all-day interviews where you interview with this person and then you interview with their boss, and then you interview with someone in HR, and then you interview with someone in a different department. Sometimes several different departments are looking for people, and they will combine all of their interviews, and in which case you want to be prepared for that with different types of resumes that you have sent out for the different types of jobs that might be available at this company. So you always want to make sure that you've asked the question when they call you for the interview, approximately how long will this take, so that I'm prepared, and how many people, so I have enough copies of my resume for everyone. And even if they say, oh, we'll have copies of your resume for everyone, don't ever believe them, so because maybe they will and maybe they won't. If a meal is involved, and sometimes if it's an all-day interview, they will take people out to lunch, particularly for some of when you get a little more job experience. Sometimes they will very often you'll be taken out to lunch to meet the team, kind of things. Well, when they take you out to lunch, let's say they take you out to Rubio's, and let's say your favorite thing at Rubio's is a big messy fish taco. Don't. Because the very moment that you take a bite of that fish taco and in one end, invariably out the other end of that fish taco comes chunks of fish and the salsa that you've just put on, and it's going to be on your shirt or it's going to be all over the table, and you just don't want that to happen. You're going to order a nice, easy to eat salad with a fork that you can, with not too much dressing, so you can fork it into your mouth. A meal in an interview is not the opportunity for free food. It's an interview for them to look at you, and make sure you're using table manners. Make sure you're not, horking the food in with your mouth. Don't talk with your mouth full. All that stuff your mom said is very relevant at the job interview. And because invariably, the moment you take a mouthful of food, they're going to ask you a question. And so small bites so that you can say one moment and swallow it and then answer their question. So when you are at the interview, make sure you are friendly and respectful to everyone, including the receptionist when you come in. It is not unheard of that receptionists are asked their opinions about people coming in for the job interview. And you want to practice shaking hands, practice with your friends, practice with a roommate. Nothing is worse than, hi, happy to meet you, type of handshake. Whether male or female, practice the firm handshake. As a general policy, don't discuss pay or benefits during your interview. You want to make sure they want to hire you first and that you're not pricing yourself out of the market. Because if you say, I'm expecting $45,000 a year, I would like $45,000 a year, and they were only planning on paying $40,000, that little switch clicks off in their head, says, well, we're not interested in this person. They might be a good fit, but we don't want to pay more than $40,000 a year. And you might have been happy to work for your first job for $40,000 a year, but they don't know that because you've said $45,000. So it's better not to even discuss pay and benefits at the first interview. If they're interested in you, a second interview or after you're hired, that's time enough to talk about the pay and the benefits once they know they want you, once they've committed to you. A really bad habit of a lot of people is automatically checking their phone. Turn your phone off so it doesn't ring, so it doesn't, no texts are coming in. So do not even look at your phone during the interview. That will piss them off. Make sure you are aware of your body language. So you don't want to be in the interview like this, like leaning back in your chair like this, answering questions. It might be comfortable for you to be in that position, but that says I'm a closed-off person subconsciously. So the best thing to do is, hands lightly folded, leaning forward, looking at the people that are answering you the questions, answering eagerly, but leaning a little bit forward, and not just like back, I'm disconnected. So you have to think about your body language. Make sure you're not fidgeting. So I have a really, when I was young, I had a real fidget in the knee problem that I had to learn how to overcome. So don't, now I talk with my hands instead. So don't fidget during the interview. Don't talk over the interviewer. Just wait for them, even if you know where they're going with the question, even if you're eager with it, wait for them to finish asking the question and then answering. And that will also give you a little bit of time to think about the answer that you want to give. And you can let 2 seconds go by. They can ask a question, what do you like best about this job? Well, so you can allow 2 seconds to go by before you answer questions that you don't immediately know the answer to. I wouldn't do that for every single question, but if you're having particular problems, it's okay occasionally to give them a couple seconds to think about it. At the interview, you want to make sure you get their names because you're going to be writing a thank you note to them. In the interview, they're going to ask stupid questions sometimes. An undergrad in my lab, when she was applying for a job, she came in and Do you know how to fix car engines was the question they asked her in the job interview. Does it have anything to do with the job? No, not one bit. And she had the perfect answer. If it is needed for the job, I am happy to learn whatever you need me to do for this job. My husband, when he was applying for a job in public health, he was asked, do you know how to solder? Now, soldering was not needed for the job. Soldering was not needed for anything. Soldering happened to be a hobby of this one guy who was interviewing. So that was his question, to see how people reacted to a completely stupid question, and so my husband said, if it is needed for the job, I'm happy to learn how to solder and do whatever you would like me to learn. And he got the job in public health. Turned it down, but he got the job. So you need to do all this to make a connection with the interviewer. If you are able to make a connection with the interviewer, you're more likely to get hired for the job. And part of this is, even if you're a shy person, even if you're a person who does not like to talk, you need to be able to toot your own horn. You need to learn how to communicate what you know how to do. Don't, so when they ask a question, just like a politician, if you can turn that question, and particularly if you don't know the answer to the question, if you can turn that question around and start talking about something that you do know how to do, they might, you don't want to do that for every single question, but you can probably get away with that for one or two questions during the interview, of turning it around to what you do know how to do. But in general, you need to be responsible for communicating to the company what you know how to do. Don't expect them to say, so tell me, do you know how to do chromatography? You talk about that, and then you wait and say, okay, well, do you know how to do PCR? And then they wait. So you want to, yes, I know how to do chromatography. I've also learned many other skills, blah, 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 blah. So you are telling them everything that you know how to do. There's a bunch of standard questions. Why do you want to work here? What makes you think you're qualified for the job? Why did you leave your last job? Strengths and weaknesses. Strengths and weaknesses is the stupidest question ever, because who's going to say, I hate to wake up at 8 in the morning and I'd like to have a job that starts at 11 a.m. Okay, my brother really would like a job like that, and he's in computer science, so he got a job like that. His job starts at 11 a.m. and goes till like 8 p.m. at night. It's fantastic for him. But generally, you're going to be in the biotech industry, and they generally start at 8 or 9 in the morning. Some will start at 7 in the morning. Sometimes, if you're in a company like IDT, they'll put you in a specific shift, so you're not even going to get to choose the time you like. So you don't want to say anything which indicates, I'm an early bird, I hate to wake up in the morning, something like that. You need to find a way to answer what are your strengths and weaknesses question without really telling them what a weakness is. So you can't say, I hate being around too many people or something like that, because you don't know. Maybe the job is going to require being around a lot of people. You don't know yet. So you need to find something that might be a weakness, but you can turn it into not really a weakness. What are your strengths and weaknesses? I love fish tacos, okay? And maybe you can get away with that once. Maybe they'll think you're being sarcastic or something like that. Maybe that'll work for you, maybe it won't. But find something that you can say when you are inevitably asked that stupid question by someone, because really, no one with any brains at all is going to really tell them what is a true weakness. What are your career and personal goals? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And this is the how long do you want to work here question type thing. You might only be working there for a year until you're off to grad school or something like that. You don't tell them that. I would like to learn new techniques and find a good company like yours that I can grow with, and apply my skills in helping grow your company, something like that. So something which turns it back and tells the company how much you love them. What did you like and dislike about previous jobs? Again, never ever talk smack about a previous employer. Even if you fucking hated their guts and would never work there again for $1 million an hour, you can never ever say anything bad about a previous employer. So what did you like and dislike about previous jobs? oh, I've loved, blah, 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 I loved working here. And you just sort of gloss over the dislike part. And then if they follow up and say, what did you dislike about jobs? I don't know that I've ever disliked a job. Why did you leave your last job? Oh, well, I graduated, you're in the perfect situation. I graduated from college, it was part-time, I'm looking for full-time, or I'm looking for something in the field that I'm working in, specific to the field in which I received my education, something like that. But you never ever say anything bad about a previous job or a previous employer. How would you characterize your work and management styles? Think about that. That's actually kind of important to getting a job. I used to tell people when grad students were choosing a professor to work with for grad school, I would tell them the personalities of the different people. The guy I worked for, Dr. Stump, he was a micromanager, but I could handle that because I could tell him to leave me alone. Like I had the personal strength to just sort of look at him and go, you think I don't know how to do this? Really? But a lot of the grad students would get intimidated. He'd sort of hover over their bench if he wasn't sure how they were pipetting. One time he took the pipette out of my hand when he didn't like it, he thought I might be pipetting wrong. He took the pipette out of my hand, he looked at what it was set to, he took the tube, went up, down, up, down, up, down, up, and said, okay, and handed it back to me. Is it petty and stupid? Yes, but can I handle it? Sure. So different professors have different styles. You're working for somebody like John Love. John Love is very hands-off. You might want help from him, but you're going to do a lot better asking some of your fellow grad students than asking him to help. So different professors have different styles. Just like in a job, different people have different styles. So if you have a really strong preference, if you think you might not be able to work with someone who's a micromanager, you probably want to say that in the interview, even if it costs you the job, because you don't want a job that you're going to hate, and have to leave it. And if you're not liking working at the job, they're going to be able to tell, and they're going to be tempted to let you go early because they can tell that you don't like the job. Because there's always a probationary period, 3 months, 6 months, and sometimes it's like, yeah, this is not working out. We're gonna let you go at the end of your probationary period. So if you have a strong preference for I hate micromanagers or something like that, even though it's not ideal, you probably just want to get that out of the way. So, greatest personal professional compliments, come up with something. The purpose of showing you this, these are not the only questions they're going to ask. These are just some of the standard ones that are asked. There are websites you can go to find more questions than these. And so sit down, take some time and think to myself, if I'm asked this question, how am I going to answer? Write it down so you remember how you're going to answer it. Review before you go to the job interview. So if you're asked any of these standard type questions, that you will have reviewed, and you'll be ready for that type of answer. It won't come as a surprise. A lot of times they'll ask you, describe a situation where you had to overcome an obstacle. For the stockroom position, when we were hired for the stockroom, we give them situational type things, and we say, okay, so a teaching assistant comes up to you and says a student has just cut themselves in lab, and meanwhile a TA from another classroom comes up and says, hey, we're all out of chemicals and we can't do our experiment. What do you do first? And so health and safety comes first, so you have to handle the student and say, I'm sorry, to the TA, I'll be back as soon as I can. Just tell your class to hang on. We'll make it right for them if we need to. So you have to have a good understanding of what's the right thing to do, as well as maybe a little idea about the job you're applying for, sometimes to be able to answer some specific questions like that. Make sure you have questions to ask. Are there growth opportunities? What do you like best about the company? What happened to the person who previously held the position? That's a good one to ask, because did they go off to grad school? Did they quit with no notice? Because sometimes if a person quits with no notice, that can tell you something about the company itself. If they were pissed off enough at the company to quit with zero notice in a professional capacity, it's not like quitting Starbucks, with no notice, which people do all the time, or McDonald's, see you later. This is a professional job at a professional company. If you have employees who are leaving with no notice, That says to you, maybe you don't want to work here, or maybe if you have a choice of more than one company, maybe this company should be second choice rather than first choice. So, why did you join the company? What keeps you here? What's the work atmosphere like in the company? So lots of different questions to ask, so make sure that you have thought of some questions to ask. At the end of the interview, and when they say, do you have any more questions after you've asked them, tell them, I'm very interested in the job. How do you see the fit? It's okay to ask them that at the end of the first interview. How do you see the fit? Make them tell you, make them say, oh, it sounds good. Oh, I'm not sure, to give you some kind of an indication, if at all possible. If they say, we're not sure, that tells you, okay, keep focusing your efforts on other companies. If they say, we really, really like you, okay, so then you can follow up with them a little bit more, so that you have some kind of an idea. And maybe they won't know. Make sure you write a thank you note to each person who interviewed you, if at all possible, mentioning things they said, and again, using that tell them what you told them idea to, again, point out, based on what was said in the interview, how you would fit into their ideal employee, and express the hope that you can work for them, and make sure you thank them, and you can do this by email. It does not have to be like a handwritten fancy note or anything like that. And it's okay to negotiate salary. These are just some starting salary ranges for companies. Different companies are different. Some companies will want to start you off at $16 to $18 an hour, but you can work for them for a year, year and a half, and then start looking around for another job, which is going to pay you what you deserve. But if you don't have any other experience, if you don't have any other option, then maybe $18 an hour is a-okay, with you. Maybe if you have some experience or you've worked in several different labs, maybe you're gonna want more money than that. So make sure you know the area, the average for the job that you're offered. If you have a bachelor's degree and you don't have a lot of experience, you're probably not going to make $30 an hour. It's not going to happen. So make sure you know the pay range that's general. These have gone up a little bit since COVID. So, but also consider what benefits the company has. Some companies will offer retirement. They'll say, okay, we're going to take 5% of your salary and put it into a 401k for you. That's additional. So maybe they have a low salary, but they're paying you, extra money towards your retirement. Maybe they have really good health care. If you're working for a temporary staffing company, the downside of doing that is they're probably going to make you pay for your own health care, or they're going to have minimal health care for you. And that's a decision that you can make. Some companies will offer you education opportunities. They'll pay for you to get a master's degree. Make sure you're looking at the entire package of the offer, not just the base salary that you're interested in. It's okay to ask for more. You don't demand. You say, well, I was really hoping for, they offer $18 an hour. Well, I was really hoping for something closer to $20 an hour if you think you could swing that. Maybe they'll offer 19. Boom, you've just gotten yourself, your first raise by asking nicely. So if you have more than one offer, you can definitely play the two off against each other. We had a PhD in our lab who got 2 job offers at the same time, and both for management type positions in sciences. And so company 1 offered him, I think it was, like $60,000 a year. Company 2 offered him $60,000, I think company 2 offered him $70,000 a year. So then he went back to company 1 and said, well, company 2's offered me $70,000 a year. Can you beat that? Not can you match it, can you beat that? And so they said, we'll give you $70,000 a year plus a company car. And then company 2 said, we'll give you $70,000 plus a company car plus we'll pay for your MBA, because he wanted to get an MBA. But he had a PhD. You probably can't do that at a bachelor's degree level, but it is okay to negotiate, particularly if you have more than one job offer. It's okay to ask for time to make a decision. They will want you to make a decision right away. Doesn't mean you have to. You can say, I would like 48 hours to think it over. I have another job interview I have another job offer potentially, coming up this week, or I have another job interview. Another job offer I'm mulling over, whether you do or not, doesn't matter. You can ask for time to make your decision. You don't ever. The only people that want you to make decisions right away are timeshares, and we know how crappy those are. So don't ever feel pressured into making a decision right away. Okay, questions? Yeah.
Let's say I already have a job during the